Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We are at the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. I'm Seth Jones and I'm here with Chad Nuss. We're doing another one of our sessions where we work on our individual artwork and different techniques, painting styles, drawing styles, and we answer any of your questions. We've had such wonderful feedback from everybody all over the place that we are continuing to do these through the holiday season. We hope that you've had a wonderful Monday, maybe a not as productive Monday as you normally would leading into the holidays with Christmas Eve tomorrow and Christmas being on Wednesday, but we're so grateful that you guys have joined us. We're going to be working on some different stuff today. We look forward for your feedback. We look for your comments. Again, if you've been joining us for some time and haven't liked, subscribed, or shared anything with us, please get involved with us. The goal is to have conversations, talk about art, talk about creative endeavors, and we're so glad that you're joining us today. Chad, how are you feeling today, bud?
I'm feeling pretty good. Today was quite relaxing. It was the first day of our winter break, Christmas break for kids.
Wishing for that spring, huh? Wishing for that spring weather.
Yeah. So we didn't really have a schedule today. Just slept in. It was really nice. And then I looked forward. I literally thought about doing this all day today. I was just thinking about the drawing and coming on here hanging out with you. And so it's a good day today.
That's awesome. Well, you're doing something a little bit different today than what you've been working on in the past. In the past, you've been working on, which is your very large, like 6 foot by 8 foot apocalyptic landscape. Today, you're doing something a little bit different. You're shifting it around a little bit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be working on for the next hour and a half or two?
Yeah, so I am working on a still life, and I'll give you all a closer look here. So this still life, it's pretty basic, straightforward still life. It's always good to practice these and just to keep fresh on your foundational drawing techniques. This particular still life is one that we had set up for my drawing 101 class, and I had started doing the still life with the students and wasn't able to finish it, but I do want to come back and finish it. So it's part of a bigger goal for me. I sat down, and I do this often, but I sat down last night and I was just thinking about like how much art I'd like to produce over the year and what does that look like and what's my schedule going to look like. And so I kind of narrowed it down to this kind of formula, and this may change. Like I change this kind of thing all the time. I'll set out a schedule or a couple goals, then I'll get into it and then I'll change it up again. But basically what I try to do every day, I try to draw for a couple hours a day, 1 or 2 hours, sometimes more, sometimes less. But my overarching goal is to draw one drawing a day. And so that's in my sketchbook. I like to do little abstract drawings. I like to journal. So I usually do a little abstract drawing to go with whatever I'm thinking about that day. So one drawing a day, one drawing a week. And so my goal is I'm working on my 3rd graphic novel. So I'm trying to do a page a week. And that's a pretty good pace for me.
Yeah.
And then one drawing a month. And so the one drawing a month is this kind of drawing. It's a kind of medium to smaller type drawing where I do a still life or I'll do a plein air drawing. It's a little cold right now for plein air, so I'm in the studio doing the still life. But I want to do some charcoal drawings, some of these drawings to hopefully have a show. And this will not fill up in a bad way, but like produce work for a show. And then also in the future, potentially works that I can sell or give away or those kind of things. So I've got, so one a day, one a week, one a month, one every 6 months. So that'll be more of a larger drawing. So that landscape that I'm working on would probably fit into that category. That size drawing would probably take about 6 months, and then one every year. And so the once a year one, I've got a couple that I've started and I just kind of put to the side, but I thought, I really need to work on those from time to time and keep them up and try to get those done. So this is a once a month drawing. And so my goal is to get this done by the end of January. There's no way I'm going to get it done by the end of December, but so that's kind of why I switched it up for that reason. And then the other reason I switched it up is we were talking about just giving these live sessions a little bit of variety. You've heard me and Seth kind of drone on about our other works, and it's good to just kind of give you a fresh look. We've talked about doing some other things like doing some figure drawing, doing a day where we draw a comic book page or cartooning or whatever. So so I picked this. This is one that I started and just haven't gotten back to. So so that's what I'm doing today.
So you brought up a lot of good things there. And one of the questions I have is, and I know you said that your schedule kind of changes, because I do that same kind of thing. I create an idea of what I need to accomplish. But as an artist, and for a lot of those artists that are out there watching or listening today, do you think that having a goal helps you achieve completion of a piece? And let me elaborate just a little bit on that, because we get asked a lot, Chad. You and I get asked a lot. Thomas gets asked a lot. That, they're like, how do you get in the habit of completing pieces? Because a lot of creative individuals, they've got this going on. You've got comic book pages. You just talked about it. Large format drawings, weekly drawings, monthly drawings. You have all these creative endeavors going on. How do you manage getting to the point of completion, right? And I think maybe the schedule is part of the way that helps. Do you feel that's true? Do you feel like having a schedule or a calendar goal, does that help you get to completion?
Yes, absolutely. Because as we talked about before, when you're more of a creative person, your creativity is always flowing. So you're always thinking about new things. And it's so easy to start new projects that the challenge is to finish projects. And so last year I was just really adamant to myself, like, you have to finish projects. You have to finish. Like, I look at all these great masters and even modern artists today, contemporary artists, and I see how much work they did. And then I look at my finished pieces. I'm like, I'm not even close to that. So my goal is to finish a piece. And so by doing a timeline like that, where it's like one a day, one a week, one a month, one a year, or one every 6 months or whatever, that just goes. I'm drawing every single day. I have a goal for the week, I have a goal for the month, and a goal for 6 months, and a goal for the year. And it just helps keep me focused. The other problem is if I just say, okay, I just want to do one a year and I'm working on a big piece, it's human nature. You get bored. Like, you're working on the same thing every single day. And so it's nice just to kind of flip it up a little bit. Now, the challenge for me is I'll move to a different piece and then not come back to the other one and then start something else and those kind of things. But by saying, okay, I've got my 1 year, I've got my 6 month, I've got my month, and I've got my week, and I've got my day, I know what to work on. So when it comes to like a larger 6 month piece, I've got a few started, but I know in my mind, before I get to those other ones, I need to finish this one that I'm working on now. So I finished that one first. Same with these monthly drawings. I've got a couple other compositions I have in my mind that I want to do, and I'm like, I get to this until I finish this one. And so that's the value of keeping a sketchbook or writing down notes or however you do it, just to keep in, for me, I just kind of keep it in the back of my mind. Sometimes I'll write a list, but most of the time I just have in the back of my mind, once I finish this, I know what the next one is. Once I finish the page that I'm working on, I've already got them laid out. I know what the next page is. Setting goals is the key for me to get things done, for sure.
And, I think it's something that, I always equate a lot to being a coach and to having coached athletes and everything. And one of the things that I stress heavily, and I truly believe this, Chad, is completing artwork or completing projects is a learned skill, right? Just like winning in sports is a learned aspect. Once you learn what it takes to win in athletics, you're more likely to be able to replicate that. And I feel like completing artwork is that same kind of thing. Once you know what it takes to finish a comic book page, once you know what it takes to finish a novel, once you know what it takes to finish a larger scale drawing, all of a sudden it's achievable in your mind more than it ever was, right? So you can really get the idea of, I know what it takes to complete a work at this extent, and now I can replicate that, and I can continue to do that moving forward. Guys, if you've jumped in, if you're watching us, please let us know you're here. Give us a comment. Let us know where you're watching from. I hope that you've got your sketchbook out. I hope you got some pencils and paper or some paints, and you're painting along with us. We're so glad that you're here. Let us know you're here. Ask us some questions. Again, this is Chad Nuss, our master draftsman and one of our instructors here at the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. And I'm Seth Jones, one of the co-founders and an instructor here. So thanks for joining us. Let us know if you have any questions. I'm working on a 30 by 40 oil painting that I've been working on for some time now. I haven't jumped into anything new like Chad has, but if you haven't seen his beautiful still life that he's working on there in graphite, maybe he'll give us a close-up here again in a little bit. He can show you how he is truly sculpting with the pencil. This is something Chad and I try to instruct our students with, which is You're not just making marks. Imagine that you're sculpting with the pencil on the paper, right, Chad? And I think this is something that hopefully we can get into. But I've got a big question for you today, something that's really kind of been sticking in my mind.
Oh,
We have a lot of students that are incredibly talented. And you and I have even talked about this in our early days of drawing and being creative. What do you think is happening now when we have so many students that come in and go, I only draw this style. I only draw examples of this kind of artwork. And it's almost becoming, I don't want to say a crutch, but perhaps it's becoming a little bit of a crutch for them as an artist. What is your take on that? What is your take on them being so stuck into a specific style or genre or technique that they don't branch out or they don't learn the fundamentals?
yeah. I mean, I totally understand it. I mean, when I was younger, as an artist, I did the same thing. And I clearly remember copying, and I'm not afraid to say, copying other people's style. And there is a part of that that is good and healthy. Like you do copy from the masters. You look at the way they drew and paint and illustrated and all that. There's definitely a lot that's really good about that. But the one caution that I try to explain to our students is that not only are you going to pick up some good habits that they have done, you're also going to pick up some of their bad habits too. Yep. And the problem is going to be when you try to go and draw your own things, then you're going to run into some issues, because if you don't know the fundamentals, then you're not going to have the freedom to draw what you want. You're going to be stuck drawing in the style of whoever it is that you're copying. Now, even today, I'm 48 and I've been drawing for probably 30 plus years. There are artists that inspire me. So I talked about this before. So the big landscape that I've been working on, that's very much inspired by the works of John Martin. The portrait that I did of my wife, that was very much inspired by John Singer Sargent. Like, I will see other master artists and I will look at their style and look at how they've done things. I'm not trying to copy what they've done, but it's kind of like a launching pad to my own discoveries. But that can't happen unless I know the fundamentals. Otherwise, I'll be stuck on, trying to figure out how to draw a mountain, how to draw, in this case, an apple or a cup or whatever it is in front of you. Yep. And you'll be relying too much on their art than your own skill and practice.
Well, and I think that there's a lot to be said. I shared with you a story about, one of my early freshman year in high school sketchbooks where, the first like 10 to 15 pages was nothing but video game art, right? From, Final Fantasies and Chrono Trigger and, and some of the classics, just all the JRPGs, which I was so heavily influenced because at that stage, I mean, you're talking almost, 25 years ago, right, Chad? And I think at that stage, it was such an influx of that artistic style. We had just started seeing some of the anime coming across, to the Western side really heavily, I should say. Toonami came on and all these other things. And I mean, my sketchbook was full of that. But then what happened was I got exposed to other artwork. And believe it or not, my uncle introduced me to my first Comic-Con. I went to my first Comic-Con in Chicago, and I was blown away by the artist booths and everybody that was there. Jim Lee was there, and Todd McFarlane was there, and I just seen Spawn, and all of a sudden in my sketchbook I went from drawing anime to drawing pages and panels from the Spawn comic books, Chad, and they were so much more elaborate, they were so much more detailed. Mm-hmm. It was absolutely intense. And then I remember, fast forward a little bit, I think it was the beginning of my sophomore year, we had a recruiter come in from SCAD, the university, and they looked at me and they said, "These are great, but what are you developing? Right? What are you building? Are you investigating the human form? Are you investigating, thinking through your own thoughts?" And I remember going, "Oh my gosh, I don't really have any of that, right? I've only been doing this." And so it really changed the game for me. Oh, we've got Tom. Thomas is actually on. He's joined us online. And Pia, thank you, Pia, for joining. Tom gave us a big hi, a big wave.
Amazing.
So glad you're on, Thomas. Thank you for joining us, brother. I think the goal is early in January, we're going to be doing kind of a multi-screen here. We're going to get Thomas to join us, and we're going to get his thoughts on a lot of things. So, Thomas, thanks for joining. So glad you're here. Everybody else, Pia, Joe, I know Joe jumped on there for a little bit as well. You guys have been absolutely amazing. Thank you for jumping in and joining. Right now, we're kind of discussing, and I'd love to get your thoughts, so please ask questions. Give us your feedback. We're discussing the difference between being stuck in a style and saying, I only draw X, Y, or Z. Or in this case, we have a lot of students that say, I only draw manga, right? They're like, I only draw after this specific artist, and that's the only way I do it. And as we're teaching them life skills, life drawing skills, chiaroscuro, hatching and cross hatching, there's a little bit of frustration there because they don't see how it reflects. But Chad and I are discussing right now the importance of fundamental elements that actually will make your style better and also push you in ways that you never thought you could push. So love to get your feedback. Love to get your thoughts on how do you advance that? Is it a challenge or is it a hindrance, Chad? I mean, you and I kind of feel like maybe it is a being a little bit stuck. But is there something to be said about mastering a specific style?
Yeah, I think, especially when it comes to, I think of the manga and anime style, there's another part of it where, especially when you're young, like you love the idea of doing a drawing and everyone looking at it and being amazed by it. And like, oh, you love showing your friends and they're all, just blown away that you have this talent and this skill and everything. And I'm not saying it's a shortcut necessarily, but there is something about, if you try to emulate, a famous artist and you learn the way that they've drawn and you draw something that's similar to that, it's like gold when you hear a friend say like, oh man, that drawing looks like Todd McFarlane or, Jim Lee or whatever big name there is, that there's something about that. But to go and master the actual fundamentals takes years and years and years. And that's a lot less, I don't know how you want to say it. It's a lot harder to have that patience to say, I'm going to spend the time to learn how to draw the human form, how to draw an animal, how to learn like shading, how to learn composition, those kind of things. Because then the payoff is later, years down the road, where you can come up with your design, your own character, your own animations and compositions and those kind of things. So it's very hard for a young person to forego the immediate adulation for a long-term benefit of being a better artist. That's not to say, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't mean to cut you off there, but it's no different than, there's a lot of training techniques from mimicking the great masters, right? There's a lot that you get from, replicating some of the great masterworks from what we would classify as the masters, right? The fine art masters. And there's a lot of training techniques and skills that you can develop from it. But I think the goal is the goal is to learn what they achieved and then absorb it, right? Absorb it and make it your own and not just throw it back out there. We have a phenomenal comment here from Thomas here. He's saying, I say, finding your visual identity and style is important. However, growing and improving past the style of your favorite artist should also be a consideration. I agree wholeheartedly. I think that's a very good statement. And I think that's exactly, improving beyond the style of your favorite artist should also be a consideration. Yes, I agree. It's absorbing it. It's digesting it, taking some of those techniques, taking some of those skills, making them your own, and then be able to regurgitate them when needed, right, Chad? Like we talk about, if you learn a specific style, you can integrate that into your work of art, but not fully make it a copy, if that makes sense, right? You're not copying it per se. You've learned the skill set, you've digested it, and now you're able to utilize it as your own intrinsic motivation and your own intrinsic style.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's, as you started, when you were saying about the, learning from the masters, I mean, that was, and I'm not an expert in this, but yeah, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do remember like that was part of the training of young artists was to go into a museum, and some instructors still do this, have their students go into a museum and draw or paint museum masterwork, try to copy it as best they can. And part of the reason for that is to learn how that artist used lighting and tone and all the different things and composition that goes into a work of art, so that when you can have the freedom to do your own compositions later on, and so there's definitely something to be learned from the masters. And like Thomas said, that then you take that as kind of like your launching pad to then create art in your own voice, because that's ultimately what you're trying to do, is find your own voice.
I agree. I agree. And I think, I think that there's a little bit now where we are in a prime time of manga and anime. It has blown up. It is saturated. It has become so prolific in our current culture, which is absolutely wonderful, by the way. I love it. I mean, the day that I found Miyazaki-san and Princess Mononoke was life-changing. Thomas can attribute this. I think we watched that film 1,000 times on repeat because it was just brilliant. But I think that, to Thomas's point, you want to move beyond, right? If you become complacent, we talked about this last session. It was either last session or the time before when we went live, Chad, where if you become complacent, then you're stuck. And complacency is not a place that you want to be. That's something, one of my great professors there, Michael Cummings at the Savannah College of Art and Design, when he would say complacency will kill you, right? You get stuck and you're not going to move on. And I think that's what happens a lot of times when artists only want to replicate one specific style, or they only want to draw that. The other thing is any of the great masters, any of them, Miyazaki-san, Walt Disney, the old 8 Men, any of these original classics, they would go and draw from life. And they would go and draw still lifes. They would draw plein air. They would go and draw trees. They would draw from tigers and everything because they knew it made the style stronger. Being rooted, and this is something you've been talking to your daughter, Georgia, who's an amazing cartoonist, and you can elaborate on this too, but when you draw from life, you're able then to stylize it better. It makes more sense. It becomes more real. And so when you do those kind of things, it's going to strengthen you without you even realizing it. And it's going to make your style or your simplification that much more believable and that much more digestible. Tell us a little bit about what you've been instructing Georgia to do, because, boy, after she drew some real life tigers, I got to be honest, the next few drawings she did had unbelievable weight to them. They felt natural. The movement of the figure was awesome. What did you kind of guide her down that path on?
Yeah, and it's the same thing I tell the other students too. Like, the better you are at drawing human anatomy and facial features and those kind of things, the better your anime and manga is going to be. Because what you're doing with anime and manga is you're taking the human form and you're abstracting it out and simplifying it. But you're not able to do that if you don't know how to actually draw the human form or facial features in correct proportion with a dynamism and fluidity and active, that's active and those kind of things. You see those anime scenes where they're fighting and there's explosions and there's all kinds of like really dynamic visual effects. But you're not going to be able to do that unless you know how an explosion works, where you sit down, you actually literally draw an explosion. Or you understand the physiology of the human body, that it can only move so far in a certain way, and anything beyond that, yes, it's gonna accentuate action and motion, but you're also gonna have a figure that's way out of proportion, and it's just gonna look odd. And so one of the things I was telling my daughter, and the thing I was telling my other students, is that yeah, your ability to draw anime and manga is only going to improve the more that you're able to draw from real life. I think of two examples. I think of, if you draw a human head, well, one of the things you have to understand is that you first abstract it out into basic shapes and forms.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what you're doing with anime and manga. If you don't understand how that works, then when you go to draw it, if you don't understand that, then what's going to happen is you're going to look kind of like you're copying from some other artists. You're not going to look like you truly understand how the form works. And it's the same with like creative endeavors too. Let's say, for example, you were mentioning trees and tigers. Let's say out of your mind, you're thinking, I want to make a tree that turns into a tiger. Well, if you don't know how to draw a real tree and you don't know how to draw a real tiger, it's going to be very difficult to make a fantastic tree and a fantastic tiger and make them morph together and make the animation smooth and the movements look real. Without first mastering what you actually see in nature. It's not until you master those things that then you can abstract it out or expand it and all those things. And so, like, to your point, my daughter took a couple of the open session figure drawing, and it was just amazing to see her wrestle with actually drawing a real human versus a cartoon human. It made her drawing so much better.
Well, and I think it doesn't even just have to be the human figure. I have a couple of watercolor students that, we started doing some landscapes, right? And we were looking at, creating what I call pulling trees, right? Pulling beautiful lines of trees and branches and then adding on some elements there. And it was funny because I kept looking, I'm going, guys, when's the last time you went and looked at a tree? Go out and look at trees, go and see how they are. You'll notice a lot of things. And then all of a sudden they came back that next session, like, oh my gosh, look at my trees. They're so much better, right? Because all of a sudden you started kind of seeing them. And I think it's funny. We've got Laughing Girl with trees and tigers, it looks like. So trees and tigers. Yes, let's talk about trees and tigers. She's back. Great to see you, Laughing Girl. Glad to have you join us again. Just a quick recap so everybody kind of knows where we're at. We've had some additional people jump in from different platforms. We're discussing the challenges of being stuck in one specific style, being so heavily influenced by, let's say, manga or comics or anything else, or even maybe being too realistic, right? How do we encourage students or artists to branch out to make their toolbox of their skill set much more robust so that way they can digest it, become it, and then regurgitate it out in a unique way? And that's not saying, look, pixel art is phenomenal, right? There are some simplified things now that exist that are incredibly communicative. I mean, we have so many students that love Minecraft and other simplified forms of communication and art. And that's not saying that they're bad, but it just means that you really need to focus on making sure that you're not complacent with it. And that's kind of where we're at in this discussion. Oh, thank you, Laughing Girl. She says, this is a brilliant lesson. Well, we really appreciate it. We appreciate you jumping in, but I love to see what everybody's thoughts are. We've got another thought here from Thomas. Let me read this one out. Drawing from real life teaches you how to reverse engineer and reverse draw that subject. This allows you to simplify and take it into a specific direction and style. Oh, boy, absolutely. This is why he's going to be joining us next month, guys. Make sure you tune in a few weeks when he jumps in, because Thomas is going to be throwing some fire like that all over the place and wisdom all over it. Hopefully, Chad and I are adding some as well. Laughing Girl, I'm glad you like this brilliant lesson. It's just a conversation. It's not necessarily a lesson, guys. So please chime in. Let us know your thoughts. Do you think it's good to be able to replicate specific styles, or do you think it's a handicap sometimes? Do you get shoeholed? Do you become stubborn in the way that you approach it? The three of us here at the Visual Arts Academy, we're pretty much set in the idea that you should be as diversified as possible so that way you can create uniquely something of your own. It doesn't mean that you're not influenced. As Chad mentioned before, it doesn't mean that you're not inspired or influenced or even at times replicating different creative measures because you're digesting it and it's becoming a part of your collective creative whole, if that makes sense. So thank you for jumping in. Thanks for joining, everyone. We're so glad that you guys are here. We've got a few feedbacks that this is a great conversation, so we'll continue this one, but let us know what you think. And again, I'm going to go back to my example, because once I ended up going to university and once Thomas and I met for that first time there and became fast friends, so to speak, all of a sudden my style changed, Chad. I was exposed to other artists, international artists, and all of a sudden the things that I thought I could draw really well, they seemed less significant. Does that make sense? I was being surrounded by so many other creative individuals that I wanted to expand my horizons so that I could create something even more unique. And I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense there, Chad? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a wonderful way of putting it. I mean, I remember I took a class, and you always run into these professors that are extremely difficult, and everything you produce, that they'll tear it apart. And, you're just like, get so frustrated. You're like, come on, man. But part of the reason why they do that with good professors is because they're trying to push you out of your comfort zone. And I think sometimes relying on anime or manga or a particular artist style, you're resting on your comfort zone. And it's usually from breaking out of that comfort zone that you learn new techniques, new styles, you grow as an artist. So I remember this one particular class. We had a two-dimensional design class. It was an illustration class. And one of our assignments was the teacher gave out an article. We all read the article, and the assignment was to come up with an illustration for that article. And so at the time, I started really getting into abstract art, and I'd never done that before. I was always like comic book or realism or that kind of art style. And so I really pushed myself to do something that was very abstract. It was way out of my comfort zone. And every other thing I had put up to that point, he would tear apart, and me and the whole class. And so for this one, instead of drawing a nice realistic picture or a dynamic comic book, whatever that I was doing at the time, I put up this really simple illustration. It ended up, I used some like collage and some graphic design. It was very simple. It was a picture of a flower made out of money, and then it was a bee, and then it was a picture of a classroom. and the article was about like the purpose of education or whatever. And so we put that up there. And first of all, like no one knew it was mine because it was so different of a style.
Right.
But it was the first time he had ever stopped and had the whole class like look at the illustration, and the first time he ever praised it, because he was like, here's someone that actually took a chance and like went out of their comfort zone and did something different. And from that point on, I started incorporating more abstract work into my whole body. Now I love still drawing realism and comic book art and that kind of thing, but I fell in love with abstraction. And it opened up a whole new avenue for me that if I had just relied on what I knew up to that point, I would not have grown as an artist.
Absolutely.
I think it's the same thing with what we've been talking about. You know, if you just rely on being able to draw like your favorite artist, like you're going to get stunted. It's until you break out of that mold and try something different that you'll really start growing.
I absolutely agree. And I think that's why, you know, you and I have talked a lot about seeing artwork in person, right? Going and actually going to museums, seeing it physically in person, because it resonates with you differently. Your brain actually, they've done so many studies now, guys, where if you actually see an original work of art, your brain functions differently than if you see a print of it or in a book or anything like that. And that's part of the learning process as well, is go view art. I encourage you, please go to your local museums, go to your local galleries, come and visit the Visual Arts Academy studio here in historic Middletown in Louisville, Kentucky. Please come by and see this work, because you're going to learn so much by seeing it in person. You're going to see the brush strokes. You're going to see that maybe something that you thought was super photorealistic actually has a lot of unique brushwork in there. You're going to see color mixing. Chad and I were talking about color mixing. You know, make sure that you guys go there and physically see them, because it's going to change the way that you view artwork as a whole. We've got one here. I'm going to put this up. This one I can put up on here. It's from one of our repeat visitors. We've got Laughing Girl here. Let's see what she's got to say. I love promoting drawing from real life and studying ordinary things. One of my favorite examples, Chad, I get carried away with this. I love Peanuts, Charles Schulz, Peanuts, Charlie Brown. I love it. And if you look at some of his early drawings back when he was in the military, he would sketch out and draw the most random things, teacups, coffee mugs. He would draw out, you know, boots. He would do all of these things. And it's kind of your comment there, Laughing Girl, which is that he would see things from life so that he could remember it, right? His cognitive ability to be able to redraw it again. And then, as you were saying, he would draw it from life in a very realistic way. He could then simplify it down into his unique style, into his unique drawing method, and then replicate it over and over and over from that point. But he was able to do it. I agree with you absolutely. Ox Smells, welcome back, Chad. We've got Ox Smells back in here again, and we've got on the YouTube live. So thanks, guys, for joining. We really appreciate you all. Chad Nuss here and Seth Jones working on some of our pieces. My oil painting's going a little bit slower today than I anticipated, but boy, I think the books on the shelf and the clock on the shelf are looking pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with where it's going. We're discussing a lot of different things today, and I do want to give a shout out. One of the great things that I love is that the sense of community, and that's all thanks to you guys. So thanks for joining part of the Visual Arts Academy and studio community. Thanks for watching and joining in today. Let us know if you have a question. Let us know if you got something going on. I want to know. Tell us what you're working on. What kind of artwork are you currently working on? If you are doing some artwork, we'd love to know how that's going for you.
Seth, I have a question for you.
Oh, yes, sir.
I know you talked about just having a frustrating day when it comes to your painting. I'd love to hear, you're welcome. I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about that, but also talk about how do you recover from that? Because I think for a lot of artists, you know, they'll get in this funk, or they'll sit down, and this happens to everyone. It doesn't matter what level you're at. You'll sit down one day and it's like you've never drawn before. It's like everything that comes you put down on the paper, it's ridiculous. And I've had those days before, and it's so easy to just want to trash what you're drawing or working on, get up and not ever draw again, or at least for the rest of the day. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you went through today, and how do you work on recovering from that?
Well, first off, thanks for making me relive how crappy of an artist I was earlier today. I really appreciate that. But no, So Chad came into the studio. We were getting prepared to go live for you guys today, and you know, he's like, "Hey, how'd it go today? How's everything?" And I said, "You know, I honestly felt like I wasted 2 hours of painting time, because I came in and I just couldn't get anything right. My color mixing wasn't right. My application from the brushes onto the canvas was not correct. I'm not saying it was correct in a sense. It was just, it wasn't working, right, Chad? It just wasn't flowing for me. And I was really, really struggling with it. And I thought to myself, I go, okay, Seth, this is the difference between being a professional or career versus I just want to paint every now and then. And that's okay. If you're just painting every now and then, guys, that's wonderful. That's great. But I'm trying to force myself to be more productive in the hours of the day and really stay focused. And so I told myself, I said, you have to persevere. You've got to put the work in. You've got to keep going. You got to push it. You can fix this, right? And self-talk is really big for me. Self-talk is a big thing. Sometimes it's really healthy for me, and sometimes, I'm going to be honest, I'm not a good self-talker. I talk down to myself, and it's not the best thing. But I'm really working on being a positive self-talker. So part of what helped me, Chad, was about 20 to 30 minutes into that session where I felt like I was failing. I sat there and said, do the work, persevere, push through, keep going. Fix it. You know how to fix it, so fix it. Don't stop at a bad spot, right? Don't stop at a negative spot and become discouraged. Work through it until you feel like maybe it's not perfect, but work through it until you get to a spot where you go, okay, I've achieved something good. Maybe not great, but I've achieved something good. Now I can take a break. Now I can walk away and come back. And I think that was really healthy for me. That was really a good thing for me to be able to push through, to persevere and say, you got to put in the work. You got to fix it. You got to move forward. And honestly, that helped motivate me to come back to it a few hours later when you joined the studio and we're doing this now. So I think perseverance is big, right? Stay motivated. You can fix it. You can get through it. Or you know what? Start another project. Start another piece. But the worst thing you can do is just not, right? We talked about this last time. It's like the workout. The only bad workout is the one that didn't happen, right? The only painting or drawing session that's bad is the one that didn't happen because you're constantly learning. You're constantly working through things. So that was huge, but it was really discouraging. It was really, I've been working on this painting and I felt like I've been moving forward and boy, it just wasn't going right, and sometimes it's okay. Sometimes take a break, step back, kind of move back in it. And then you ask, well, how did I come back to it today? And a big thanks is to you. It's like I've said this over and over, and it's something that has stuck in my head ever since he told it. Our co-founder, Thomas, told me one day about a year and a half ago, right when we were envisioning the academy, he goes, you don't have to work in a vacuum. You don't have to work in a vacuum. And part of what changed my motivation today was your energy coming into the academy, getting excited about the live stream, knowing that we're going to share our artwork with people and talk with people. And that was a huge motivator for me. That was, okay, Seth, get back on the horse, get in the saddle. You're going to be painting again, and you're going to share it with the world. And so that was a huge motivator for me to dive back in. And now this bookshelf, I think, is actually turning out pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with it. So first and foremost, persevere. Keep the work going. Don't become stagnant. And be your own motivator, right? Be self-motivated. Be intrinsically motivated to get the job done, even when it's not going well. Finish on a good note. Finish on something good. And then also, to surround yourself with other people that motivate you and encourage you, because that is a huge part of what we do as artists. We are a community, and it's good to support each other. So that's kind of my take. But, Chad, we've got a couple comments here. Laughing Girl, she says she's busy with a large painting, except there's no paint. It's just made of fabric. Oh, wow. I would love to see that. Oh, my gosh. So it's Laughing Girl is working on a large painting, except for her medium is made of fabric. How unique, how wonderful. And I love how she's saying it's still a painting, Chad. It's not a woven piece. It's not this or that. I don't know what your application is, Laughing Girl, but that's incredibly exciting. I'd love to see some of this. And I'm going to try to look up some of your artwork. Hopefully I get a chance to see it. But I love how she said it's still a painting, Chad. How's that make you feel in knowing that she's painting with fabric?
Oh, I love it. I mean, it appeals to the abstract side of me. I do like a nice traditional oil painting or acrylic painting or a graphite or charcoal drawing, but I do love to see people using different medias or different materials and that kind of thing. That's part of being creative too. A lot of times we think, well, being creative is taking oil painting and doing that painting, that subject that no one else has done before. But being creative is also being creative with the materials you're using. Absolutely. As well. So I love that. I'm with you. I'd love to see what she's working on.
That's incredibly exciting. And then we've got Ox Smells here. I'm going to throw this one up here. And hopefully, if you guys get a chance, show us your social media links in here, guys. I'd love to see where we're at. But Ox Smells, I'm a complete start from scratch novice, so I'm just at different styles, and I'd be best off starting. Laughing Girl has encouraged me so much. to mess around and find out. Absolutely. Well, again, there's that art community, right? There's that point of community to where we encourage each other and we motivate each other to get in there and dive in and experience things. If you don't start, you never finish, right? If you don't start, you don't get to experience all those unique elements. So that's really encouraging. That's absolutely off. That's absolutely awful. Awesome. Sorry. She says, she's going to finish it today. She's out of the stream for now. She's actually going to go work and finish this thing. That's exciting. Thank you for joining us, last girl.
Yeah. So I appreciate your vulnerability, and I apologize for, bringing up your feelings of failure today. But I really think a lot of people, artists, struggle with that. And I think it's almost like one of those taboos to talk about. Like, everyone wants to seem very successful. They want to seem like everything they work on just, is just a masterpiece and just ends up amazing. And you often feel you feel like a lesser artist because you see these other artists just come out with these amazing works of art. But you forget that every artist, no matter what level they've been at, have days where they get in the studio and they're working on something, and it doesn't matter what you do, it just does not work the way you want it to. And I think the real challenge is for every artist is, how do you recover from that? Like, how do you recover from that? How do you turn that into a positive and keep going? And it's like you said, yes, it's perseverance. It's also keeping like a larger perspective and realize, like, let's say you get in the studio and you start working on something and you mess it up. It's having the confidence to say, so what? Like, okay, I messed it up. It's fine. I have tomorrow, or I can start it again. Start it fresh if I have to, or like you said, work on something else or switch it up just to give your mind a break. Sometimes you work on something so much, it's hard to see it anymore. Yeah, go ahead.
It's so amazing you say that. And I want to apologize, everyone, to Laughing Girl. I misread her comment. She said she's out of steam for now. So she's taking a break from her piece. She was hoping to get it completed. But that goes right in line with what you just said, Chad. Sometimes you just need a break. Sometimes it's okay to walk away. I do encourage people, and I'll say this again, I do encourage you to get to a point where you feel comfortable with it. If you're out of steam like Laughing Girl, walk away from it. Take a break. You can come back to it another day, right? But I think it's always healthy to don't end on a bad note. I teach my athletes and I teach my daughters that when we're doing physical activities, to finish on a good note, right? Finish on a made basket, finish on a goal, finish on a good score. I was a goalie in lacrosse. Finish on a save, right? Finish on a goal scored. Finish on some kind of positive note, because that energy resonates with you into the next time. So even though Laughing Girl is tired and she's kind of out of energy at this point working on this piece, I hope that she finished the day on a good note, so that way when she wakes up or when she goes back to it, she has that energy to continue to work on that piece and to stay motivated in a positive manner. And so I think that's really good. I thought she was Ox Smells. I thought she was leaving the stream too. I thought she was going to leave with us, but she says she's hanging out with us, guys. So we're so grateful. Awesome. So glad that you guys are there. Really excited. We thought you were hanging out, but we're super glad that you guys are here. And definitely share some of that information with us. I'd love to check out this beautiful painting that you're doing with fabric. I think it's absolutely amazing. Very exciting, very intriguing stuff.
I think the other thing is if you leave a painting or a drawing on a frustrated note, for me at least, I can't shut my mind off. So all I think about is,
yes,
man, that thing, I've got to fix it. I've got to fix it. And it can drive me crazy. And to the point where, if I have at that house that I'm working on, I'll find myself in the middle of the night because I can't stop thinking about it, going down and at least fixing that one part. And so I think it's wonderful advice that you were giving about, end on a good note. Like, if there's a particular part that's really frustrating you, you can't get where you want to go, at least pick something that you can say, okay, I really like this line, or I really like this particular tone. I'm just gonna leave that there, and then tomorrow I'm gonna try and replicate that and continue it in the parts that I didn't like. Or, if it's let's say you portrait and you just can't get the nose right, it's okay to erase the nose and just say, you know what, I'm gonna come back tomorrow. I'm gonna start fresh and redo the nose. Or at least that's what I've got to do, because otherwise all I'll think about is that stinking nose all day. So
Well,
I just got to get somewhere.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's kind of common among artists, right? I don't want to say to be obsessive, but a lot of times people, become obsessive with the artwork that they're doing and what they're trying to achieve, and it consumes a lot of your energy, it consumes a lot of your mind. And if you're positive about it, if you end on a good note, I think that transitions over. And Chad, I want to go back to something that you mentioned a minute ago, because it's that time of year where we're going to see a ton of this, and I think it's relevant. You talk a lot about your speed of completion, and I know that you're holding yourself to a new calendar, right? A completion calendar, kind of a goal, if you will. And you and I talk about how we work at different paces, and a lot of artists work at different speeds. But one of the things that you're going to see a lot of coming up on social media, guys, all over the place, and this is a good thing, but it can be a bad thing for you if you hold yourself to other people's standards, is kind of the year in review videos, right? Actually, one of the artists I've been heavily motivated by lately just did one where they show all of the paintings that they've completed in the 2024 year, right? And they do this video, and it's beautiful. And man, is it inspiring. You're like, look at that, look at this, look at that. It's awesome. It's motivating. It's really good. But then sometimes it can be discouraging, right, Chad? Where you look at it and you're like, they completed how many large format paintings that are amazing? Yeah. They completed how many pages of a comic book? And so you can't let that discourage you. So as the year comes to a close and you start seeing all these amazing social media videos and all this stuff, let it be something that's positive for you. Don't let it be something that's discouraging. Everybody works at a different pace, and sometimes you're fast, sometimes you're slow, or sometimes you're just slow or just fast, and that's all okay. And we did get a note from Laughing Girl that she definitely finished on a positive note today, so that's awesome. Very exciting to hear.
Yeah, it's funny that you would say about the end of the year review or the end of the year post or whatever. I literally, and this is like secret confession to everyone here. Today, I was sitting on the couch and I Googled how long did it take for Salvador Dali to complete a painting? Because I wanted to see the masters. How long did it take for them to work? There's been other times where I've Googled like different authors, like how much time did they spend every day writing? I also Googled how long does Salvador Dali, how long did he paint every day? And it's kind of a guilty confession because it's going along with what you're saying. Like you really shouldn't like compare yourself with other people, especially the masters. But at the same time, you do try to get kind of like gauge where you're at, I think sometimes. But it was really encouraging because, and I don't know how true this is because
I was saying, come on, you're keeping me in suspense, man. You're killing me here. I want to know.
I'm sorry. So the math doesn't work out, but according to one website I saw, it said he painted for about 2 hours a day. And I was like, That's amazing. That's my goal, is 1 to 2 hours a day. I love it. And then I saw another Google site that said it took him 1 year, basically on average, a year to complete a painting. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. But then there was another site where it showed like he completed like 1,800 paintings. And I'm like, okay, the math doesn't work out here.
He didn't live that long.
Yeah, because I'm like, come on, man. Like if he did one a year, obviously, it'd be like 60, 70, 80 paintings or however long he lived. But so he obviously was working on probably multiple paintings at a time, which allowed him to finish multiple paintings every year. But and then I saw some like there was another website where it was like practices of the top 10 artists, and it would have like Andy Warhol and I can't say her name, Louise. I can't say her last name. She did the big spider.
Yes, I know who you're talking about, and I can't
think of her name, but either way, she did the big spider sculptures. And everyone's different. So like for one person, like Andy Warhol had said he would get up at like 9 a.m. He'd have a call with his agent or whatever. They talk for 2 hours. They'd go out in the village, like shop until the afternoon, and then he would like do his art for the rest of the day. Or like Picasso, it was like he would get up after lunch in the afternoon at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon and wouldn't start painting until that night, but he would stay up till like 4 a.m. And so he would paint all night. It was the same with I think Robert Rauschenberg was the same. He would sleep all day and paint all night. Or maybe it was Jackson Pollock. I forget who it was, but either way, it was like everyone had their different speed, their different schedule or whatever. So it's the thing that we always talk about. You can't compare yourself with other people. You can use it as kind of like information and may be helpful, especially if you don't like drawing or painting at all. Sometimes it can be inspiring, it can motivate you. But at the end of the day, like, everyone's different. You know, you've got to manage yourself best that you can.
I agree.
And one last real quick thing I would say, everyone's at a different place in their life too. You know, it's like, I've got 4 kids. I, work a couple part-time jobs, and I've got a lot going on. So I don't have the luxury of spending 12 hours a day painting, whereas someone else might, so I've got to break my art up. So I have like a couple hours in the morning, and then potentially an hour or 2 at night. And I'm really bad about using my free time. I'll end up being on social media or whatever. So that's part of the reason why when we started this live feed, I talked about doing a drawing a day, because I realized in order for me to do a drawing a day, and I'm not saying like a finished drawing, I'm saying like a sketch or whatever. In order for me to do that, it means I've got to put social media down. I've got to put my phone down. I've got to turn off the TV. I've got to not play video games or whatever it is that's distracting me, and use my time wisely. So everyone's different. Everyone is in a different season of their life, has a different schedule. So just be gracious with yourself.
I agree with that. We do have, I want to point out something, Laughing Girl, if you're still with us, our co-founder, who is based out of Costa Rica, he has a studio mate there in one of his studios there that also works. And I apologize, Thomas, if you're still with us, if you can give me her name. I can't think of her name at the moment, but she does some amazing work kind of in a similar vein. And he's going to get some images of that. He's going to share some of that with you guys. So that way you guys can kind of see, again, you're not working in a vacuum. Art is global now. I don't know where you're based out of, Laughing Girl, but you can see other artists that are doing really unique things and create these communities. That's part of the reason that we do these live sessions here at the Visual Arts Academy and Studio, guys, is to connect artists with other artists and to share the passion and to share the love. Everybody does a lot of different stuff, but our co-founder is actually a studio mate with an individual that works on some fabric type stuff. And I apologize, her name will come to me, but I'll get that to you, Laughing Girl. And I would love to see your stuff as well. We got a comment here from Ox Smells, which I think is great. Let's see what he says here. If someone compared your work to a famous artist, would you feel offended by that? And I don't know if that's for me, Ox Smells, or if that's for Chad, or if it's for both of us. I don't think I'd be offended by that, in the sense, because famous artist, I guess it depends on which famous artist, honestly. There's some, if you're telling me Alexander Duchamp, who put a urinal in a gallery at one point, maybe not, right? Maybe not. But I think I would take a lot of pride in the sense that somebody would even consider me to be on that kind of level, if that makes sense. And I think I would be honored. I think that I would hope that I developed enough of my own personality, kind of like what Thomas and Chad were talking about at the beginning of the live stream, that they would see my work and go, oh, this makes me think of such and such from a level of skill, but I would still have a unique enough approach of my own work that they would go, man, it makes me think of Norman Rockwell, but it's still Seth Jones, if that makes sense, guys. I think, Chad, for me, I would take a lot of pride in the sense that they would say, this reminds me of so-and-so, but I hope there's enough of me in it that it doesn't feel like a complete replication.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I think when people say that, it kind of hits in two senses. Like, on one sense, often people will say that because they like your art and they're like, oh man, like this looks like this style or it looks like that style. On the other hand, sometimes I get a bit like, well, yeah, it looks like that style, but this is my stuff. Like, so, it's really kind of a catch-22. Like, on one side, like you're saying, it is a compliment, but the downside is it almost feels like they're discounting your work. They'll say, like with my comic book stuff, this is going to sound like a humble brag, and I don't mean it this way, so please realize what I'm saying. They'll say like, oh man, your stuff looks like Bart Sears or Jim Lee, which I love that. I mean, that's a huge compliment. Those are guys that I definitely have learned from. But at the same time, there's a part of me that's like, yeah, but I'm Chad Nuss. Like, I'm not as good as they are. I'll never be as good as they are. But at the same time, like, I have my own unique thing. And it almost feels like when someone says that, like they're just kind of, okay, yeah, I've seen that style before and I'm just going to move on. So it depends on who they're comparing you to. They're like, it depends on the heart behind it, why they're saying it, those kind of things. So yeah, I think it's both a compliment because they see something in you that you see in the greats and the masters. But at the same time, like as an artist, it's part of being an artist. You want your own voice. And so you want people to see your voice rather than
absolutely. And I want to go back because I didn't mean to upset Laughing Girl here, because we admire, or I don't want to speak for Chad. I admire Marcel Duchamp as well. My point in saying that was, if I'm working on a very illustrative painting and they go, it looks like a urinal in a gallery, then probably I didn't achieve the technique that I was looking for. That was my whole point. No, he was genius. Chad and I have talked, if you missed some of our earlier live streams, we've talked at length about how being that creative mind that he was, pushing what was acceptable in galleries and things of that nature, was absolutely amazing. No, we absolutely love and admire Duchamp. You're a huge fan of Marcel Duchamp, Chad. I mean, you're a massive, huge fan. Yeah. So Laughing Girl, no offense to Marcel Duchamp or what he achieved by any means. I was simply stating that if I'm doing an illustrative painting and somebody goes, oh, it looks like this, I probably didn't use the right medium, or I probably didn't achieve what I was trying to achieve there. That was my whole point in saying that.
Yeah, Marcel Duchamp is my favorite artist, and I discovered him in college, and that was part of my phase of like my art shifting into abstract work, and I absolutely love him. And I remember last year, or I think maybe it was 2 years ago, I got to go to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, where they have all of his work there. And it was a religious experience. I mean, it was just like amazing to be in the room with art that he created, and to see all the things that I'd seen in books, and to be there like in front of them was just absolutely incredible. I love the fact that all the things that we've already talked about, the way that he challenged art and those kind of things. The downside, though, is I don't really like where contemporary art is going, and a lot of that is because of him. So it's kind of a catch-22. But at the same time, like, yeah, I love his art. So
well, and it goes back to what we were saying, Chad, about go to a gallery, go to a museum, see these pieces. You said it was almost like a religious experience, having been able to be there. Make sure you go and see these places. Make sure you go and participate with them. You know, it's a different experience when you see them in person and when you get to experience it in person. So love on your local galleries, love on your local studios, love on your museums, support them any way you can. We absolutely love it. I am going to mention here the artist that we're referencing, Laughing Girl. Her name is Katrine. I'm probably not pronouncing that right. If you guys have watched our live stream, I'm from Kentucky. I struggle with accents, whether it's English, Italian, French, Spanish. I was calling it a grisaille for many, many years. So, you know, as we learned, it was a grisaille. So I apologize for accent, but it is, and I don't know how to post. I'll post this here. This is her Instagram. If you want to take a look, I will put this here. Thank you, Thomas, for sharing this information. I really appreciate it. Again, we love building this community and connecting artists. Here is her Instagram, Laughing Girl. If you want, please share yours. We'll follow you. We'd love to see your artwork. I'm super interested in seeing what this painting is that you're working on. And also, too, I want to go back to Ox Smells as well. I love the fact that you said if I could complete one painting in a year, that would be great. Awesome. Strive for that, right? That's great. Try to get that goal, and I hope that you stick with us so that by the end of 2025, you can tell us that maybe you completed one painting or maybe even two. But I love that you have a goal set out for yourself and that you're so motivated and you're encouraged. And I'm also glad that you have other friends like Laughing Girl that are motivating you and encouraging. And hopefully we do the same. Hopefully Chad does that for you as well. We do that here at the Visual Arts Academy for you because, again, as our co-founder says, you don't have to do artwork in a vacuum. Be surrounded by people that motivate you. Be encouraged by others. And I think it's an absolutely wonderful thing. And then repay that back, right, Chad? Repay that back to others. If people motivate you and encourage you, share that love, share that respect for the arts, and motivate others. And it's the greatest feeling you have. It's absolutely awesome.
Yeah, I love, like, this is the one thing I love about getting older is that, you know, as a young person, a lot of young artists and young people in general I've talked to have either literally voiced these words or have at least thought it, I think, is just the desire to have someone kind of build into their life and give them some guidance. And especially in the art world, sometimes it can be a bit cold or like almost like
standoffish
and a lot of like competitive, that kind of thing. But really, no one really wins when that happens. When everyone's like, well, I want to be the best artist in the room. Well, who cares? It's like, but anyways, just as I've gotten older, I love the fact that now I'm able to turn around and encourage younger artists and give them some lessons and help them along with the mistakes that I've made. And building into others in ways that you've been built into is just like so rewarding.
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of the reason that the Visual Arts Academy and Studio was built. It was a dream of Thomas and I's that we had way back when we were young men in art university. And, we realized we had discussed a lot about what was it like growing up as an artist? What support did you have? What outlets did you have? What places did you have to go and to be mentored and do all this stuff? And I think, that's why we built this, is to be there and be supporting with everybody. So I think it's great. I think that's a huge thing. Thomas, thanks for jumping on. We look forward to having you on here, guys. Thomas, one of our co-founders, is going to be on here in January. Make sure you stick with us. We'll let you know when he's jumping on. Thank you, Thomas, for jumping on and being a part of this. We've got Oxmel's. I have not heard of L.S. Lowry. Have you, Chad?
I have not, no.
Lowry sounds really familiar, but I don't think I'm connected. I'm thinking of a pen and ink artist that I think is like that, but I don't think that's who it is. And then we've also got him saying, with LG introducing me to several artists with different styles. It's fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating. It is absolutely wonderful. You'll be amazed at how much you can consume, right? You don't think it all can fit in your head, but boy, once you get going and once you start digesting other artists and other creatives, it's addicting. It becomes fuel. And I encourage that. It's great. It's absolutely amazing. Awesome stuff, Oxmel's. Very cool. Well, Chad, my shelves are coming along a little bit slower than I normally work, but I think that's because the conversation's been so daggone good tonight.
Yeah, it's definitely different to draw and talk at the same time, for sure. It does slow you down, but I actually really like it because it makes you focus a bit more on what you're doing while you're talking. So I really love it.
Well, I'm still used to just having cameras all up in my face. Trying to paint and do all this where you have a camera here. It's definitely a unique thing, but I love the fact, and I hope some of you that are on here with us, I hope some of you that have joined us, I hope you guys are working on your own work. The whole goal is to kind of be together, draw and paint and write and do some creative endeavors together. Or if you're like Laughing Girl and you need a little bit of a breather because she's been doing a lot of creative work today, take a break and just join us and have a good conversation. But I hope you're painting and drawing with us. I hope you've joined us here at the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. And again, this is Chad Nuss, our master draftsman and one of our instructors here. And I'm Seth Jones, one of the co-founders and an instructor here as well. And we're just so glad all of you have joined us today. It is a Monday night here right before the holidays and a little bit chilly in Louisville, Kentucky, Chad. The weather's a little cold.
Today is Christmas Eve.
Oh, that's right. Thank you, friends, for that one, right? You get to Christmas Eve. My kids are incredibly excited. They're out of school. You had mentioned your kids are on break as well. And I love it. It gives us a chance to be together as a family because as soon as we wrap up this live stream, I'm going home and I'm cuddling my little kiddos up and getting my cuddle session in because it's nice and chilly out. Dun, dun, dun. Well, guys, I'm going to zoom out here in just a second. Chad, do you want to give us a close-up of your drawing and give us a little look at how it's going?
Sure, yeah. As we talked about before, my process is very, very slow. So it probably looks the same as when I showed it up close at the beginning, but there you can see there's a teapot, a teacup there.
That's beautiful.
It's on a box, and then you've got a glass jar and some apples. And so when I work on something like this, I'm really kind of all over the place. So when I first started, just to get loosened up, I just kind of worked in this area because it's just flat shade. So I just to get my hand loose. And then I started working in some of these smaller details of the shading down below this teacup. And then as I was looking at the teapot, I noticed some of these areas need to be darkened, and they still do. That teapot is like flat black, but I want to show some of the highlights in there. So I'll continue to add more layers. I don't want to lose the highlights, but at the same time, it does need to get a bit darker. And then some of these like folds in here, I need to work on defining them a bit more. But so I started here. I worked on a bit of the teacup. I went into the teapot. I worked a little bit on the glass over here. And then just now I was starting to kind of put in some details of this apple, and then I'll probably work on the other apples. Then I'll go back over here just to give my eye a rest. And also in doing that, I can measure and compare tones all over the still life and make sure everything is consistent.
Well, I think it's looking pretty awesome. I think it's looking great. I love how you're taking that traditional approach that you and I, we call sculpting, right? We call it kind of sculpting the drawing a little bit. And I absolutely think it's looking fantastic.
Thank you.
And I think it's interesting to see you shift from, we talked a lot today about using life as a reference and as a tool to improve your skills. But I love seeing the difference between that and your apocalyptic landscape, right? You can definitely see that between the two, there's a lot of technique there, right? A lot of your mark making, your value creation, your chiaroscuro, your hatching and cross hatching, and all those same skills are being utilized for two very different drawings, right? One is drawing from life. You want it to feel real. You want it to feel whole. The other one is an interpretation of life, right? It's very realistic, but it's your own interpretation of a mountainside in an apocalyptic landscape. So that's why we encourage a lot of our young artists to have those skills so that they can be utilized how they see fit for their creative endeavors, if that makes sense. So that way you can use it for whatever it is that you're working on. So I think it's awesome seeing it. I'm going to put my paints down, Chad, if you want to talk for a minute, and I'll get a nice wide view of the painting here.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to that is, so one technique that I'm purposely not using in this is I'm trying to stay away from using one of these blending stumps. I'll show you one of these right here, which I am using on the landscape. Instead, I want the marks to kind of blend themselves. Now, I will use one of these putty erasers, and that does help blend a little bit, but I'm trying to stay away from blending. I do want you to see some of the pencil marks or at least to be there. I'm trying to lay it very subtly, so a lot of those marks will just kind of be blended out, and it'll look really nice and real and soft and beautiful just with the pencil marks themselves. So that's, as I go into a piece, I often think about my technique up front and what are some of my goals and what are some of the things I want to achieve. And with this one, I'm trying to stay away from the blending and more using the tools to let them kind of layer and blend themselves. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you've got going on there, Seth. And I'd love for you to kind of talk through your process today.
Yeah, so here's what I've got. You guys can kind of take a look. Some of you have seen the overall piece. Some of you have not seen the full piece. And so this is 30 by 40 on canvas that was primed and then coated in a yellow ochre. And what I have, as you guys can see, I have my reference photo that I took of my daughter that I'm using. But as we've discussed, it's more of a reference, right? I have it's very structured. It's very similar to that. But I have a lot of freedom that I've chosen to use. But this is the piece. I'll go ahead and scoot this out so you guys can see a little bit more. I started dropping in some of the super light values, and I work around the whole piece. But let's see. How's that look, Chad? Can you guys see that from there?
Yeah, we can see the whole thing. It looks beautiful.
Awesome. So one of the things that I'm big on is making sure that I create values and compare my values across. And so what I want to do is make sure that the value of the flesh tone is reflected in, the lightest lights and the darkest darks, and then creating what I call high levels or points of contrast, right? Which is not a Seth thing. But what I want to do is I want to create interesting points of contrast, such as the highlight on her cheek and her super dark brown hair. That creates a vibration for the human eye, and doing the grisaille, it allows me to figure out where those are. So compositionally, I can work the piece around the viewer's eye around the piece that I want. So I know that I have one here. We as humans look at eyes more than anything else, right, Chad? But I have this really dark with this really light that's creating a high level of contrast. So that means that I can't have that over here, or else it'll be distracting, right? It'll pull you away from her face. Then in this sweater that she has, we're going to have a ton of vertical striping, right? A ton of vertical striping, which we know verticals create eye movement. They force you to look. And then as you come down, you get to these beautiful, or sorry, maybe my arrogance is showing, I shouldn't say that, but I think these very well sculpted feet. And with these very well sculpted feet, you have a high level of contrast as well, from the dark floor to the lightest lights. But then as you shift over here as a framing device, guys, you'll see that there's those strong vertical elements of the wood molding, right? And so those strong vertical elements, it just creates this nice vertical composition that just drags you up and down that whole piece. So that's what I'm trying to achieve. I don't know if I've got it yet, but I think the foundations are there, Chad. to create those high levels of contrast, that lightest light versus a dark, and creating that movement that I'm looking for and moving the viewer's eye top to bottom from the piece. What do you think?
Well, the first thing I would say is don't be embarrassed about complimenting your own work, especially on the feet, because as I told you, those feet look like something out of a Renaissance painting. They look beautiful. You've really captured the weight of the body, and it really is very solid, and your technique in there is beautiful. I also love that you talked about the composition, because I think sometimes that's overlooked in some ways, and I love how you're being intentional with your vertical lines, and you're thinking about even the lines and the stitching of the sweater. That's one thing that we talk about in our class when we talk about composition. Things like leading lines. Leading lines aren't something that a lot of viewers of art think about, but they are intentionally put into an artwork to kind of guide someone's eye around the piece. And so as we've looked at some of the paintings in our classes, and we look at like how sometimes a window or a window pane or a column or even maybe a type or a design that's on the side of a building or whatever, it's all used intentionally by the artist. They didn't have to put that in there, but a lot of times they'll put that in there to guide the eye to the focal point they want. And I love what you said about the vertical lines. Lift your eye up from the bottom, and with the horizontal shelves, it creates a natural circular movement where your eye naturally goes up, gravitates towards the face and the eyes, which is the thing that we all always gravitate to. You go across to the left over the bookshelves and then back down again to look. And so your eye is just looking all over the painting. So that's a beautiful use of composition.
Well, thank you. And I'm constantly, I think it's one of those things where you and I've talked about, we hope that we are those instructors that students remember, right? And I think that's a great dream and a hope to have, is to be a positive energy in a student's life, but also one that encourages them and teaches them to improve, right? It's good to just be an encourager, or like I'm called constantly a cheerleader. But if I'm only cheerleading and I'm not helping you improve your skills or advance yourself, then I'm not doing right by you, if that makes sense. I'm not being a good professor or a good instructor or a good teacher, because I should help you be encouraged, but also develop your skills. And I hope my students hear my voice in their head the same way that I hear Alvarez's and Michael Cummings and some of the other professors. And one of the ones that stood out for me with Professor Alvarez was, you have to be better than your reference. If you've listened to our live streams, if you've attended any of the Visual Arts Academy and studio sessions that I instruct, you will hear that constantly. It's okay to use reference, but you have to be better than that, right? You have to make better decisions. And a lot of those decisions for me, Chad, are compositional choices, right? Yep. How do I want the composition to lay? I love the rule of thirds. I also love the Fibonacci sequence, the golden spiral, the golden ratio. My novel series is based on the mathematical equation of the golden ratio. But the whole goal is to create a storytelling element that I want to achieve. And your composition allows you to be in control, right? And even abstract work, correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, you're much more well-versed in the abstract world. Laughing Girl, you could probably chime in on this as well. But the abstract is still choices, right? It's still chosen compositions. Some of them are chosen to be happenstance, right? Just random occurrences, but it's still a conscious choice of letting that happenstance occur. And I think that's a big thing for me, is I always want to make those decisions to improve what I'm trying to achieve as my goal. And for me, a lot of times it's narrative. For me, it's trying to tell a really unique story. And the story of this painting is that growth from childhood into adolescence of my daughter, right? She's losing that childhood innocence. She has that cockiness of a young tween, and she's kind of growing in those ways. And so that vertical composition to me makes it very strong. And boy, if you've ever met my daughter, that's Cora, she is incredibly strong. And so I wanted a strong composition to convey that message, right, Chad? I wanted to build out the painting so that it has that, her leaning up against the wall. Is the wall supporting her, or is she supporting the wall kind of concept, right? And I'm hoping to achieve that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of, I was recently working on page 2 of my new graphic novel, and the one I had already drawn it like last year. And then this year I was like, I need to get back into drawing that book. And so I redrew the page. And I thought the second drawing was technically better as far as the detail and some of the elements in the drawing. But the composition of the page I had done before was 100 times better and much more interesting to look at. So even though I spent hours and hours and hours on this page, I realized I'm not going to use that page. I'm actually going to use the other one, all because of the composition. And composition is so important. You can make or break a picture with composition. You could draw figures that are technically out of proportion, or if you want to say incorrect in that sense, if you're going for realism. But if your composition is on, you can really make up for a lot of those mistakes because it's just, beautiful and intriguing to look at. And that goes back to the whole thing about abstract art. Like, a lot of times people look at abstract art and they have no idea how to judge it or how to even process whether it's a good piece or not. But a lot of times it goes back to composition. Like, what are you doing with those elements? What are you doing with those splatters of paint or that random line or whatever? Why is it in there? Like, did you just put it in there because it's cool and hip and different? Or did you put it in there because it's serving the composition? And that's the thing that you always have to ask yourself.
Well, and I think a lot about like Mondrian, and again, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, so I apologize there, guys. But, I think a lot about his works, and the choices that he made in the geometrical formats. And, those weren't happenstance. Those were absolutely chosen. And I think that's part of the beauty, right, is he was choosing geometrical layouts and square shapes, and even the colors. The colors are brilliant. But there's a lot of that progressive art of what the early 19th century, right? That era where they were doing things from a mental choice, from a compositional choice that a lot of people don't know how to interact. And maybe that was part of the purpose, right? Is, hey, we're changing the way people interact with what we consider the academic world of fine arts, right? I mean, that was a big thing. Was changing the way that the academic element of fine art was discussed. And we've got a great question here. And I think this is, and by the way, I want to say thank you to Laughing Girl. Thank you for the compliment. Chad, she says our work is looking great.
Thank you
for that. But we've got a great question from Oxmells. And I think this is actually a really interesting one because I know your answer, Chad, is going to be very different than mine. But then you and I both resonate with a current thing that's happening in modern art. And so I think we're both going to be on the same page with this. And the question is, and I'll put this up on the screen for everybody to see. And golly, thank you guys so much for so many people watching and joining in tonight. What a wonderful experience on a Monday evening. But Oxmel's question is a fantastic one. And he says, is there any style of art that you don't like or not particularly a huge fan of? Chad, I'm going to let you have the runway with this one, buddy, because you and I talk about this quite a bit. I'll let you kick this one off.
Yeah, so I'm probably going to throw a little curveball at you because there's some things we haven't talked about with this. But I would say, okay, any that I don't like. So there's a lot of contemporary stuff I'm really having a hard time with. And it's not because it's edgy or different or anything like that. I just have a hard time with it because, and you have to understand, a lot of contemporary art would be considered like postmodern art. And the goal is not for technical accuracy or skill or anything like that. So a lot of times it's actually anti-skill. So you'll have really bad drawing and really bad painting, and people will like rave over it. And so there's just a movement right now that really highlights that. It's almost like you get praise for your lack of skill rather than your ingenuity of idea.
Right.
So I have a really hard time with that, with some of the stuff. Now, some of the stuff is brilliant. Like, for example, I can't think of the name of the piece, but it was designed. It's a sculpture. It's a mechanical arm, and it.
I've seen this.
Yes, and it's like
and it leaks oil. And
it's squeezing its own oil. And when it started, it was programmed to like dance and like show off and all that, and it was keeping up with the oil that's leaking from itself. So it's keep going, but then years pass, and it can't keep up with it, and you see it slowly running down until I think it's 2019. It finally died, and it
finally died. I see. Dude, I'm not gonna lie, and you guys can joke. I didn't know you were gonna bring this up. I literally almost cried at that because I was thinking about the struggle of life, right? And this machine's desire to feed itself to keep it alive. I mean, wow.
Yes. So an artwork like that, absolutely profound. I like one of my favorite pieces of all time. However, on the other side, like I'll see a lot of artwork, and right now figuration is huge. You see it all over the place. People doing figure painting, but the painting is so poor Like the technique is so poorly done. Yeah, it's raved about. It's like raised up as like this great new movement, and I just really have a hard time with that. I'll tell you the other one that I have a really hard time with, which we have not talked about, and it's just because it's my preference, is fauvism. I have a really hard time with those like really bright color, and like the color combinations sometimes are really jarring. It's just one of those like when I look at it, it doesn't speak to me. I just have a hard time with like, man, amazing. Now on the other hand, like I love the work of Cezanne and I love the work of Degas. I love all those that came before it, but I just those kind of bright colors, which you're seeing a return of that now in contemporary art. If you go into like a 21C hotel, or if you go into a contemporary art museum, you see a lot of artwork, sculptures with these really gaudy, bright neon coloring that, sorry, Laughing Girl, she just put fauvism is my favorite. I am so sorry. I apologize, Laughing Girl.
But that's also the beauty. That's also the beauty of art, right? Is what resonates with one soul or one person. It doesn't have to resonate with everybody else. And that's okay. Exactly. That's the beauty of being a global art community. That's the beauty of being able to do so many different things and still have an appreciation for it, even if it's not what makes your heart sing. And that's okay.
That's right. So Laughing Girl, you and I, we can have Marcel Duchamp. We love Duchamp.
That's right. That's right.
I just can't do fauvism. But either way, like, but you're, as I was saying before, you see that now, a lot of these contemporary sculpture, like you'll see like on the wall, like a puffy pillow in like bright pink with like green, whatever, like bubbles on it or something like that. Like, I just don't connect with that kind of art. Or like you'll walk in and it'll be like, it just weird sculpture that it just doesn't speak to me, you know? So I just have a hard time with it. What about you, Seth?
Well, I think, so I guess, and this is, again, take this for what it is, because again, it's personal preference, right? I have struggled a lot with, and I don't even know what this is called, Chad. I don't know if you would call it contemporary performance art, maybe, I guess, perhaps. I struggle with some of this where it's very anticlimactic, performance-based art. I don't know. I don't have the verbiage for it, and I apologize, guys. So maybe I shouldn't speak to it. But it's this kind of like, like you see people jumping on like mini trampolines and dragging the ground across the page, or you see like these guys stacking barrels of wheat grain and then just dumping it over. And I get the idea, the concept of what they're trying to somewhat achieve. I will say this, I have not seen one in person. So I've been preaching, go and see things in person. I haven't seen a ton of performance art live. I've studied a lot of performance art, especially in the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s. And there's a lot there that is absolutely brilliant, very emotionally driven. I just feel like a lot of the contemporary is lacking that extra oomph. I think it's not as, it's lacking something. I don't know how to put my finger on it, but it doesn't have that same energy or the connection that some of the great performance artists had in the 60s and 70s when performance art really became a huge thing. And I think that's something I'm having a trouble connecting with in the contemporary art world, is the performance art just doesn't speak to me. Like now you see all of these people do that trampoline fall thing, right? Where it's like a trampoline on a rotating thing with stairs, and I've seen like 50 different versions of it. And I don't resonate with that. Maybe I did on the first time I saw it, where I realized what it was. But now after the 50th and 60th time, I don't resonate with it. And I think that's the underlying factor I struggle with of a style that I don't understand, is this contemporary notion of replication of a performance piece. Like they're replicating these same performance pieces that have been done already. And maybe there's a statement in that, right? Maybe there's a statement of our current society being that. But I struggle with that personally. That's not something that I've been able to resonate with. But I will share a quick story with you. I was able to go a couple weeks ago and speak with a senior living facility. And a lot of those individuals lived during the peak moments of the 60s and 70s performance art. And Chad, getting to listen to them talk about it was overwhelmingly amazing, right? A couple of these individuals were able to be there for some peak experiences, and to hear them reflect on it, that's why you've got to be there, right? Being physically there, being in person, seeing the paintings in person, seeing the performance art in person, it's a whole different experience. And so I don't want to speak too negatively of it because I haven't been there in person. But from what I do see, it's not something that resonates with me, ox smells.
Yeah, I think to add to that, like for example, one of my favorite artists is Kazimir Malevich, who did Black Square, right? So for a lot of people, they think, well, that's not art. Anyone can paint a black square. And point taken, I agree. He did one where it was like a white square on a white canvas. I get the pushback on that. I have no problem with that painting. However, it's when someone in the 21st century decides to do a bunch of black squares, you're like, it's already been done. It's different when it's the first person that does it. They're pushing the envelope. I have a lot of respect for that. But when it's rehashed, I really have a hard time with that. And that's just a personal preference. Like, that's the thing. Like you said, Seth, everyone has their own view on art. And I don't want to sit here and trash art. So I'm not trying to trash it. I'm just saying, like, that's not my preference. Someone else might love that. So, for example, the huge news this last year was the banana that was taped on the wall with duct tape. And for me, like, I have a love-hate relationship with that piece because on one side,
I can get it. Yeah, I can actually get it. Yeah.
That's a Marcel Duchamp thing. You've made a ready-made. It's completely different, though. So it's kind of like Duchamp, but it's different. But then on the other side, I'm like, yeah, but Marcel Duchamp did already do that, and it doesn't take a whole lot of effort, but I do understand the concept for it. But the one thing I really loved about that was the guy that bought it for like $6 million, which was ridiculous. Right. He ate the banana and so became part of the artwork.
Yes,
and I was like,
that's what I get.
I love that.
Me too.
I love that part of it. But
it goes back to and I'm going to butcher this. The pipe. Let's say je sais no pipe. Yes. This is not a pipe, right? Yep. And I was discussing this with somebody, and they go, "Well, why do you have the value of him eating the banana? That's stupid." And I go, "Okay, imagine that this is not a pipe, but it's a painting of a pipe. But then imagine that somebody takes a pipe and puts it on a wall. What's the ultimate purpose of the pipe? To be smoked, right? To enjoy that pipe and to smoke it. It's like somebody taking it off the wall and then smoking it. And I said, so what's the purpose of a banana? The purpose of a banana is not to be taped on a wall, but to be consumed, to be eaten, to be digested. And so the completion, almost the full circular nature of that artwork then becomes the consumption of that banana, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that part of it. When I first saw it, I reacted like I think most of the people is like, this is ridiculous. Right. And to pay $6 million for it, or however much it was, like that's a scam. But the idea of him taking that banana down and eating it was like, oh, brilliant, chef's kiss. I love that because I do love conceptual art, but within reason. Like there's some of it, I'm like, okay, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. But sometimes you can really hit on something that like transcends the artwork itself and speaks on multiple layers, and I love that kind of art.
And that's what I think that was, right? That's what I think it was. And I want to agree a whole 1,000% with Laughing Girl. Boy, she's given us some really good feedback today and some good points. I don't agree with scam art / culture either. I agree with you. I think that's a shame. And unfortunately, that's happening in a lot of elements of our society and our culture currently. Scams, you hear all these stories about how they're targeting elderly individuals. People are using, voice recognition now to scare parents, to scare families, and the art world has not had it. The art world has had its fair share of that as well. Is what I'm trying to say. Is that the art world has not been left out of that. And Laughing Girl, I agree with you 100%. That I don't think anybody that really cares about art is going to agree with that much. The scam artists and the point of scams. I'm not a big fan of either. And I think that kind of goes into the AI creation. AI is a phenomenal tool, but I don't like the idea of people trying to scam off that it's a created human work of art when it's something that they just put into an algorithm and it spit it back out, right? To me, I kind of clump that into the scamming element, trying to scam individuals into what's being made. But I agree with you, Laughing Girl. I think that's a challenge. And I hope that most artists also try to continue to fight the scamming. That's something that hurts all creative individuals. And I agree. I hope that's something that the art community continues to fight and to go against.
I'll tell you another conceptual piece that I absolutely love was Banksy made the flower girl that was throwing the flower, and then he sold it at Christie's, and then as soon as they hit the gavel, it like shredded like halfway down. I was like, oh, that is so brilliant on so many levels conceptually, because now it's like on one side it's him destroying art, but on another side it was like increasing its value even more. And it was beautiful.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it was also a statement about the auction process, right? Like it was like this idea of the auction house in general, you know, which honestly has been a challenge for the last hundreds of years. You know, I mean, the idea of these auction houses and how art is purchased and how art is bid on and everything like that. I mean, I still go back to the idea that art should be something that speaks to your heart, right? Yeah. It should influence you no matter, you know, we've talked a lot today, and I'll recap for everybody. We've gone through contemporary performance art. We've gone through modernism. We've gone through post-impressionism, we've gone through all these different things, and it's been brilliant because a lot of the comments have been, well, I like this. I didn't like that. I love this. I like that, you know, and that's okay. That's the beauty of what it is. But I think the goal is to make sure that, you know, you have a personal relationship with art of whatever kind that is. I personally believe that. Whether it's a great movie, a great novel, Chad and I talk a lot about music, whether it's music, a play, the ballet, or the visual arts, if it motivates you, if it speaks to you, if it encourages you, that's when it's something that you should have, right? Yeah. And there's a certain art form to decor. Don't get me wrong. Oh, it matches the drapes. It matches this. It matches that. I'm not saying that there isn't positivity with that, guys. Don't knock me for that. Don't email me telling me you're crazy. All I'm saying is I hope that people have a personal experience with art, especially the visual arts, and that's what motivates you to purchase it, not necessarily because it's going to be a great financial asset. Now, that's true. There are cases where that's important, and that's okay too. But I hope art resonates with you. I hope it speaks to your soul, and it's something that encourages you and motivates you on a deeper level.
Yeah, 100%. I love it. Yep. Yeah, I see Oxmelt says there's a lot of fake Banksy ripoffs here in the UK. And, you know, that's the thing. Like, in contemporary art, you'll see that even with, like, Basquiat, who I love. I love Basquiat so much. I used to not like Basquiat's work at all. But then I really started getting into it and seeing the genius there and the layers of meaning and how he used type and all that kind of stuff. At first, I was really turned off by his style because it just seemed so childish. But the more I studied it, the more I realized how genius it was. But you see that now in contemporary art, there's so many Basquiat ripoffs, it drives me insane. And you'll see a certain style where someone will use, like, you know, they'll use type, or they'll handwrite things across the page, or, you know, whatever, or like Cy Twombly, who I absolutely love. At first, I absolutely hated it because, once again, it looked like a kid could have got up there and just took a crayon and, like, scribbled all over a piece of paper. But I love it because he was the first one to do it, and he broke a lot of norms, and he did a lot of things that no one else did. And there's something I love about that. Now, some of his stuff is ridiculous. Like, there's some Cy Twombly stuff where he'll literally have like 3 marks on a page and a word, and people hail it as a masterpiece. I'm like, bro, I've done that in my sketchbook. It's not that profound. But at the same time, some of his stuff is just absolutely incredible. And, you know, it's that he's a perfect example. Cy Twombly is a perfect example of how some people, you either love him or hate him. Like, some people look at that stuff and they think it's ridiculous. It looks like child scratch. And there's a lot of people that will copy that style, and they'll just do a lot of scribbles. And you can kind of see in contemporary art where all those, that same influence over and over and over again. So that's the part I don't like, but I do like the freshness of it, you know, trying new things, that kind of thing. And as we've said over and over and over again, everyone has different tastes. So
here's one for you, and I'm going to throw this out to Laughing Girl because I'm curious to see what she thinks. This is, you know, my master's degree is in sequential art. Chad, you have a degree in sequential art. Roy Lichtenstein, who used to just take old pixelated comic panels that were printed, he would blow them up on a projector and basically do large dot printing, the printer type style. And he would not change anything. He would literally just take it from a comic book form. I understand. I've studied this pretty significantly because it was a huge aspect of what I talked about. But I love the concept, but was not a fan of the application, if that makes sense, right? I love the idea that he was taking comic book art and saying that it can be fine art only if the medium changed, right? If you just changed the medium and put it in a gallery, it would be fine art. but he didn't even give credit to the original artist, and he didn't, like all that stuff. And so I struggle with that, but I get it. So I'm curious to see if you're familiar, Laughing Girl, if you're familiar with Roy Lichtenstein. Chad, I don't know if you are or not, but what are your all's take on that? Where he changed the application, the theory was good, but he literally just took another person's artwork and reproduced it.
Yeah, I mean, I go back and forth because I do like Lichtenstein. So I understand what you're saying. I understand the pushback. I am not a fan of him not giving credit to the original artists. But I also love Marcel Duchamp took a Mona Lisa and painted drew a mustache on it. And so I like that. But so I go back and forth. I mean, I agree with your point. I have a hard time with some of that. Yeah, it's a delicate balance for sure.
But you know what I think is a win for all of it? What I think is familiar with all of it is it motivates people to have discussions like this. And I think that's really healthy. I think that's really, really good. So if nothing else, I give a big shout out, a big thank you to those artists for creating such conversations that we're still having them. How many years later? Yeah. I mean, think about that. We're still having a discussion about this 50 years later, 60 years later. It's unbelievable. And so, I mean, it's really interesting to me that at least it has breath of life that we're still discussing it to this point, And so it's interesting. Yes, she actually said, big artist for the pop art world. He was a contemporary of oh my gosh, Chad, why am I blanking on it? Of Campbell Soups. Oh my gosh.
Oh, Andy Warhol.
Andy Warhol, right? And it was interesting, but it was interesting, the application of that and what he did. And I think the biggest thing for me, Chad, you hit the nail on the head, was that he didn't credit the original artist, because at that time, you guys have to remember, at that time, comic book art was not considered art. It was considered something for kids. It was second rate. It was not, I mean, even there's a story where the great, oh my gosh, Stan Lee talks about that even when he was making tons of money at Marvel, even though they were printing books left and right, and he was finally making good money, is that he would go to, social events and he would not tell people, he would say he's a writer. He would not tell people what he was. He would not tell them that he was a comic book creator, because comics were looked so far down upon. So if nothing else, Roy Lichtenstein did bring comic art to the forefront of art communities, right? And he did, maybe it wasn't his point to do it, but he did bring the essence of the fact that, comic book art is art. It's not just some silly cartoon that gets printed for kids, right? It changed the perception of that. So, I'm not a big fan of pop art too much either, Laughing Girl, but I always try to see the value in some of that. And I think the value is that we're still discussing this to this day.
Well, I mean, the reality is pop art's better than fauvism. So what are you going to do? Just kidding, Laughing Girl.
But he's not. No, I'm not. It's awesome. No, what wonderful conversations, guys. Thank you all. I do these break-ins every now and then, and I just want to say thank you guys so much. Everybody has been absolutely amazing and so supportive of what we're doing here at the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. We're so grateful for you to be a part of this community, for joining us either on your break like Laughing Girl is and taking a break from some of the beautiful work that she's working on, or, if you're just joining for the conversation, or you're painting and drawing with us. We're so grateful for everything that you guys have. We hope that you're having a wonderful Monday, or depending on, I guess, where you are around the world, you're making sure that you guys are having a great experience, and for joining Chad and I as we work through our pieces of artwork. We've got just a little bit longer. We're going to go maybe another 15 minutes or so, guys. You guys have been absolutely amazing, absolutely wonderful. Thanks for joining in. Drumstrum 3, I'm probably going to get that wrong. We got Carrie Witt on here. Guys, thank you guys for jumping on and joining us. The great goal is to ask questions, engage with us. We're talking art. Right now, we've shifted. We started talking about drawing in a specific style, and if it was good to branch out, if it's good to do the traditional methods. And now we've gotten into a full-blown art history conversation, which is so interesting. One person loves this or respects that, and so on and so forth. But please ask us questions, engage with us. Let us know what you think of the artwork. Chad's working on a beautiful still life in graphite, and I'm working on a 30 by 40 oil painting of a portrait of my daughter that I've worked so heavily on this composition. So thank you, guys. We've got maybe, Chad, another 15, 20 minutes, bud.
Yeah, that's great.
So we'll see where it goes. We have no idea. Just so you guys know, these are not scripted conversations. These are not scripted. This is truly live drawing sessions where we hope you come and draw with us. We're going to have more of a schedule for these, but Chad and I even joke. We're like, do you want to know what I'm going to talk about? And we typically don't, right, Chad? We don't want to know what each other's going to ask each other. We like that it's organic, kind of like our paintings and our artwork. So we're so glad you guys joined us. Thank you guys for making this an absolute blast.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like just the other day, I told Seth, I was like, okay, I've got a painting question for you, and it'll be good discussion. And he was like, oh, we were texting back and forth, and I texted him back and I was like, well, do you want to know up front so you have time to think about it? And he's like, no, I want it to be kind of fresh conversation. I agree with that. I like the spontaneity of having a good question, having to think about it on the fly. And so I love these discussions. I could do this all day, every day. So I love talking about art. I love drawing. I love making art. So it's a great time.
And we're so glad you guys love it too. Again, if you're just joining us, we had some people jump on. We are the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. We're a brand new art academy and studio out of Louisville, Kentucky. We're moving into our 4th month here. We teach students of all ages. We focus traditionally on the fine arts. We do everything from drawing 101 all the way to illustration, to sequential art, comics and cartooning, oil painting levels. We do just about everything. But what we found is that we had a lot of people, and it sounds like Ox Smells and Laughing Girl and some others. We've got other individuals down in Latin America and all over the place, that they wanted to be a part of this community as well. And the best way that we knew how to do this was to go live for you guys. And so that's what we've started doing. In between classes, we start our next round of courses and classes in January. We're going to keep these going all the way through that. So we're going to find time that we can add in other artists. We're going to bring Thomas in. I think the first week in January, we have our co-founder, Thomas Tupper, coming in and joining us, where he's going to be live. We're going to bring in other artist, Chad. And so, guys, we love this. We hope you guys are enjoying it. Let us know where you're from. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Let us know that you're here. Ask some questions. We love the fact that we're building a community for the Visual Arts Academy and Studio, and we're so glad you guys are part of it. So thank you, guys. We're working to make this better. If you have suggestions, you know what? Chad and I love those too. We will take those suggestions. We'll contemplate over them, and if it's going to create a better environment, a better experience for everybody here, we'll absolutely do it. So thank you guys for making this a part of it.
Susanna has a question for you.
Oh, yeah. There she is. Hey, guys. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Monday. This is a great question. So I think this is this what you're referencing? If this is what you're referencing, this is called an artist maul, an MAHL, an artist maul. My first maul stick was just a piece of like wooden rod, I guess, from a craft store. And I bunched up a whole bunch of paper towels and tape and wrapped the tape around it. And basically what that does is, if you can see on the screen, I'll try to do it up top here, is you can place your maul stick on the canvas and it steadies your hand and it allows you not to smudge, and it steadies your hand as you work. So you can work around the canvas, and I can have my hand out here and I can have better control, and it allows me to hold it significantly better. So it's an artist maul. You can get these. You can make them. Chad, I think at one point, what did you say you were using, Chad? At one point, your maul was a curtain rod, I think?
Curtain rod, yeah.
Which, again, so it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be anything, crazy or wild. It can just be kind of what it is. But yeah, an artist maul is a very helpful tool. We actually have those here. So as our students use them and work, we have those here for our students. But again, it could be $1.25 from a hobby store where you just put some paper towels and some tape on the end of a dowel rod. That's what I was looking for, a dowel rod, or even an extra curtain rod that you've got going around. So a maul stick's really, really helpful, very beneficial. We've got Oxmells who asked, what do we think of pour painting? What do we think of acrylic pour painting? I will teach that technique. We have an acrylic 101 class, an introduction to acrylics. And part of the reason I teach that, Oxmells, is because of the viscosity, the liquidity of pouring paint. It's a great way to explore the very liquid versions of acrylic painting. It also teaches technique of layering and color buildup, as well as drying times and the nature of just that. So I do teach that in our acrylic 101 class. I think it's something that is very much influenced by like the creative artists of Pollock and some other individuals. I think there's a place for it. I think it's become kind of more, what's the word you use, Chad? Kitschy
yes,
kind of thing.
Kitsch.
It's kind of become more of that rather than a fine art element. But I do think it's a wonderful exploration, usually, not always, but in acrylic painting. So we do some pour painting here at the Academy in our acrylic 101 class to discuss certain techniques and skills that are involved in acrylics. Great question. It's awesome. And thank you, Susanna, as well. We love your comments and your feedback, and we appreciate it. It's awesome. A maul stick is a lifesaver when working in oil.
I think Ox Mills, and I don't want to speak for you, but he may be referring to, if you get on social media, you'll see a lot of those reels of people putting a bucket of paint and then just like over a canvas and throwing it, like having a string attached to the ceiling and just let it like pour back and forth over a canvas. And like for me, I don't appreciate that. Like other people might appreciate it, but it's not my preference.
Well,
personally.
I have seen some where they use that as a grounding technique, Chad, where they don't use that as the final piece, but they'll use that as a happenstance grounding, right, to create a background that they'll then go on and do some really skilled work on top of. I do have a value in that because there's different ways to create a grounding element for a painting or a piece of art. So I think there's give or take, but I kind of tend to agree with you. If you're talking about that, I think that's, I think there's a place for that. This is that discussion of what is fine art and what is not fine art, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a discussion we will have for eternity. What is craft versus skill versus fine art versus just art versus decoration, et cetera, et cetera. That is a discussion that could go on probably forever.
Yeah, and it goes back to what we're saying about people's preference. Like, certainly you can get like really cool looking designs from that, and if you want to sell that, that's fine. If you want to buy it, that's your prerogative. I know like with like, for example, the artist Damien Hirst, some of his stuff I really love. It's profound, like some of the concepts. Some of his stuff drives me insane. I want to bang my head against the wall. And one of them is he does those spin paintings where he'll, it's the stuff you see at the county fair. People have done that on t-shirts, and he's doing it like it's this profound, amazing piece of art, and then turns around and sells it for millions of dollars because of his name. Like I get that, but so it's kind of a give and take. Like I said before, some of his artwork I absolutely love and adore, and I think it's profound. And then some of it I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. But that's just kind of how art is. Like, it goes back to your preference. Some people love that stuff and other people don't. It's like, yeah. And so I always want to guard like coming off like trashing all this art and that kind of stuff. That's not my purpose at all. Because some people could look at, this still life and be like, that was done back in the 19th century. Why are you doing that?
Right.
I get it. So like, yeah. So it's just personal preference,
Yeah, but there's also a difference. You're using that as a multifaceted element. You're using that as a skill practice, as a refinement. You're doing that as a study. You're not going to, there's a different element there, right? At least to me, Chad, correct me if I'm wrong. There's a different purpose and a different element of that practice and of that completed artwork. Right. It's a different choice and a different decision than just saying, hey, this is a completed work of art. That's the most profound thing you've ever seen in your life.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Boy, I have gotten a ton of painting done today. This has been absolutely amazing. Absolutely fantastic. I hope that around the globe, you guys are having a wonderful opening up to your holiday. As Chad said earlier on, what is it, Chad? It's Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve. So I hope you guys are having a wonderful time. We are, just in case you guys are here locally, we are going to be closed down for Christmas Day and New Year's Day. Christmas Eve, we're going to be open until 2 p.m. New Year's Eve, we're going to be open until 2 p.m. So if you have some last-minute shopping, or if you want to give the gift of art, sign some of your relatives or yourself up for a creative art class, come by and see me tomorrow here at the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. I'll make sure you get placed into one of our wonderful courses and classes that start in January 6th. We also have a lot of gift card options you guys have and some supplies. But really, we are just glad you guys are joining us and tuning in and being a part of the Visual Arts Academy and Studio community, because ultimately that's one of the greatest joys we have, is building up the art community and being connected to all of you. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. We got about 10 more minutes or so. So Chad, any hot topics that you want to discuss before we go? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not going to do another live session probably until the first week of January. So if we've got something that's pressing, ask it now, guys. Get it out there now, because we'll probably be back either the 3rd or the 4th of January. So let's see what you guys got. Any last-minute topics that you guys want to discuss?
You put me on the spot. I wasn't even thinking about hot topics. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just thinking about clothing folds right now.
You're thinking about what?
Clothing folds. Trying to get these.
I gotcha. That's awesome.
No, I appreciate all the conversation, especially about, the art history and all that kind of stuff. I love that. So.
Well, what's funny, Chad, is I got asked a lot when we built out our first schedule. In our curriculum, we have over 37 classes of curriculum built out for the Visual Arts Academy and Studio, and a number of them are art history classes. And a lot of people ask me, they go, well, aren't you guys a Visual Arts Academy? And I go, absolutely. But art history is an incredibly important aspect of visual arts, and for you to be able to create the way you do. And so I encourage anybody, buy an art history book, go take a lecture, listen online, come to one of our sessions, there's so many resources out there. But as a Laughing Girl, and Oxmel says, and he's newer to the arts, but as Laughing Girl demonstrated, her knowledge of art history absolutely influences her thinking processes. It absolutely influences Chad and myself and Thomas and other individuals. Art history classes should be part of what you're taking if you're trying to grow as an artist. Chad, I hope you agree with me, but art history should be part of what you do, not just skills-based classes, not just studio-based classes. Art history should absolutely be integrated into what you do, and I think that's incredibly valuable.
Oh, 100%. I mean, and we've talked about this before as far as being a good reader when it comes to art as well.
Oh, yeah.
I finished earlier this year. I finished the Letters of Van Gogh, which was really, really helpful to see like his thought process and how his life was, his relationship with his brother, his relationship to the greater art market, his relationship to Gauguin and some other artists and everything. It was just very fascinating to really get a look into his life. And if you don't study art history, you miss that, right? And so, for example, right now I'm finishing up a book on Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks. I'm just looking through his sketchbook, and they translate out all that he's written. And I'm just like blown away with the amount of detail he puts into understanding proportion, like how an ear is related to the nose and the angle from the eye to the mouth, and just on a whole nother level than I've ever studied, or how perspective works, and just so many other things. I just ordered my next book I'm going to read is Eugene Delacroix, I think is how you say his last name, his journals, because everything that I've ever learned about modern artists from Impressionists onward, especially the Impressionists, would always reference Delacroix. They always say how amazing of an artist that he was. He was like the father of modern painting and all that kind of thing. But I really have a love for journals. I love to hear it from their perspective, their life, what they struggled with, what they were working on, those kind of things. And I resonate with a lot of what they're saying. Now, I'm not on their level, but there's something about being an artist that's common no matter what level you're on. And it's art level, or art history is just a beautiful engagement with other artists. They inspire you, they push you, they motivate you. So yeah, I love art history. It really is key to becoming a good artist.
I love it, Oxmels. I love that you are researching those. Frida Kahlo is a great one to learn about. Dive in, please. Heavily, so influential, not just as a female artist, right, but as an artist, period. She was just so amazing, so brilliant. And her story is just, there's been movies made about her. But it's almost like a movie. Her story is perseverance, personal pain, pouring out of her soul into her artwork. It's a phenomenal one. And I'm super glad to hear that you are researching and learning about, or have recently learned about her. Chad, I love hearing you. You've motivated me to read some books. Perhaps we need to put a VAAS reading list together. I think that might be a good idea.
That's great.
We have a library here. If you haven't been to our academy, we have an entirely a whole lounge area with a whole lot of different reference books, a whole lot of different reading materials, everything from comics and cartoons all the way up to the biography of Da Vinci and his notebooks and things of that nature. But I think maybe we should put together a curated reading list. I think that might be a fun thing. The Visual Arts Academy and Studio curated reading list, Chad. Maybe we'll have you head that up because you're reading like crazy.
I love it. Yeah, that would be great. I think that's a great idea. And like I said before, there's nothing that motivates me more than learning about other artists and kind of their struggles and what they went through. So yeah, I love that idea.
And Laughing Girl, thank you so much for joining us. No apologies needed. We're so grateful that you're here and you've been a part of multiple of our streams. I cannot wait to see what you're working on, because I think painting with fabric and painting with the materials sounds absolutely amazing. I hope you were refreshed. I hope this was energizing to you. And I hope that when you go back to work on it again, you've got some good motivation, some good excitement to finish that piece up. I know you were trying to do that today, but way to stay strong, way to take a break from it and come back to it with a fresh mind, a fresh vision. Good luck finishing that up. We hope to see you next time, Laughing Girl. Have a good evening and have a good night's rest. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, we'll
Guys,
see.
Oh, sorry, Chad, go ahead.
No, I just said we'll see you later, Laughing Girl. Thank you. Just exactly everything Seth said, for sure.
And guys, we've got just a minute or two. I'm actually going to start wiping my hands off because I have gotten oil paint all over me. We're going to wrap up here in just 1 or 2 minutes, but thank you guys so much. Big shout outs to everybody with all their feedback and their comments. We are going to be doing this again. Again, this is Chad Nuss, our master draftsman here at the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. I'm co-founder and instructor Seth Jones. This is the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. The goal is to do artwork together, to discuss all things art, have a great time, and to continue to build a community. I think our next session is going to be the first week in January. We'll let all of you guys know after the holidays. The festive season is taking place right now for everybody. You know, I can't thank you guys enough for being a part of this. Chad, any last kind of comments or closing thoughts before we wish everybody a happy holidays and we break for the evening?
No, thank you all very much for being a part of this. I love the conversation. I love spurring each other on to be better artists. And so I look forward to the next time we're on.
Well, that's it for us tonight, guys, here at the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. Thank you all so much. We look forward to seeing you soon. Good night and happy holidays.